Welcome everyone to Mailfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Agatha All Along, episodes 8 and 9, because they came out together. Episode 8 is called Follow Me, My Friend, to Glory at the End, and episode 9 is called Maiden Mother Crone. So, spoilers for the episodes. This is a Patreon-sponsored pair of reviews, so thank you to Alison for picking the show. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. Obviously, general thoughts about the season as a whole here as well are going to be a part of this, and kind of what they've done, which there is at least some interesting swings that it takes in this last couple of episodes. The twist at the end of episode 8, which reveals that the road was never a thing, it never has been a thing, and that it was all just created by Billy, just kind of like how Wanda created the town and like the TV shows that she was in. Billy created the Witch's Road based on his subconscious and what he thought it would be, and it's based on a number of things in his bedroom. I actually kind of like that twist. I don't love the last two episodes, I've not really loved the show that much, but I do think that twist is pretty decent, mainly because it was a genuine, nice swerve, because, you know, throughout the show there's been these teases of like Agatha's been on the road before, but then lots of hints that say maybe she's lying, she's never really been here, she doesn't know what's going on. Billy himself even asking those questions, and as that was going back and forward and we were thinking about that throughout the show, I definitely never really felt like I cared that much. I didn't find that an interesting question, because they were sort of beating us over the head with the is it this or is it that. So for the twist to be that she was shocked that this place even exists when it happened, not because she's never been there, but because it was never there to go with in the first place. She's known the entire time that the Witch's Road was nothing but a con by her. The Witch's Road was, I mean, her son kind of started it inadvertently, but she was using this lie, the promise of the Witch's Road, to lure in witches, to kill them, take away their magic, to keep herself young, and that was the whole thing. It's never been a real thing. It was bait to lure in people and kill them, and it's something she's been doing. So it's one of the few times in a TV show where they do a little flashback to a moment from earlier in the episodes, and you see that moment in episode 3, no, episode 2, because end of episode 2 is when they go into the road at the end of the episode, when they do the song in the circle and she looks shocked. I actually thought that was a very worthwhile moment of flashing back to. I think TV shows and sometimes movies, but mostly TV shows, are very aggressive sometimes with like, oh, the audience won't remember this moment, so let's flash back to it. I actually think the context of her reaction for that moment is so different when you know the twist, that it was worth showing us that little reaction again, to see like, oh yeah, she always was shocked that this place even existed, and she was playing along to, you know, whatever, see where it goes and ultimately get what she wants and so on. Run away from death, yada yada. I do think the twist is solid, and there's some fun elements to it. You know, the actual reveal of Billy looking around his room and realizing that all the different things that they've been through have been inspired by something in there, and they've all come from his mind in some ways. And because we were spending a lot of time looking around the room in that part of the episode, I got a good chance to look at all of his posters, which was an interesting little journey of discovery as I was reading those. It's funny that I complained that there was no Willow from Buffy in the closing credits, I think back in like episode 1 or 2, whenever I talked about them, because there's a Once More With a Feeling poster on the wall. So props for that. There's also a Trans Lives Matter poster, which is cool, but ultimately it's the movie posters that were really sticking out to me, because it kind of felt like they might have inspired some of the trials, or like, you know, it's not hard to imagine ones like Saw, which, you know, I don't think Saw is very good, but whatever. There was a couple other things that I didn't, you know, movies that I don't like, but it did have a Carrie poster, which I can applaud. That's cool. Weird one was Poltergeist 2. That's an interesting one. I'm trying to imagine the individual that would have a Poltergeist 2 poster on their wall, because it's not a movie you hear people say they like. I haven't like the first Poltergeist that much. I think it's a little bit overrated. I don't like 2 that much either. I actually kind of like 3, bizarrely. It's not a great movie, but anyway, I'm tangenting. The point is, it's just a weird poster to see on someone's wall. in a TV show. But notably, I think most of the things that the posters were up for are stuff that Disney own. Although Carrie isn't owned by Disney, but Disney do own Buffy now, and they do own they own Poltergeist too, I think, because that used to be Fox, as did Buffy, and there was something else. There was a few things where I went, oh, Disney own these things now, so they can throw them in as much as they want. They got free reign. Anyway, that's not what's important here. But I did like the twist. I will say that for any critiques that I'm about to say, for any general negativity that I'm about to have, and I'm going to brace yourselves, I did think the twist was pretty neat. However, I do think there's some messiness to the story. I do think there's stuff that they just didn't even bother trying to delve into. I can't believe how little there is after these 2 episodes of actually developing and expanding upon the relationship between Agatha and Rio, or should I say Death, because I really thought we were going to get more of that. You know, in fact, more than half of episode 9 is the flashback. It's the story of Agatha and her son, Nikki. And we get the moment where Death's coming for Nikki at childbirth, and he was supposed to die then, and basically she bends the rules for Agatha, something that's hinted at in the previous episodes, that she's had special treatment. But knowing that, okay, I'll buy you some time, but I have to come and get him at some point. And seemingly he lasts about 6 years. But she did not give him up for power. She did not sacrifice him, much like the stories had said, which was a solid thing to learn, don't get me wrong. But I felt like, okay, but why was she given her special treatment? You know, what was their relationship before she got pregnant? I saw some quick speculation after a quick Google that some people think that Rio's just straight up the father of the baby, which, fair enough. But that opens its own can of worms of like, what does Rio feel about this kind of thing? I don't know, very, very disappointed they didn't expand upon that, given that the implications of their backstory and the fact that they had some kind of romantic relationship was easily one of the most interesting things that had been teased over the course of this show. Obviously, yes, they get their big smooch when Agatha's sacrificing herself in episode 8, which, that's another thing, episode 8 felt like the finale. If I didn't know there was another episode after, I would have assumed that was the end of the show. It's just because episode 9 was sitting right there, it was like, okay, I guess there's more. And there was more, and they obviously they established on, or elaborated on some things. Some of which was, solid things to elaborate on. Because I do genuinely like because the other part of the twist, the part that's not, coming from Billy's mind, I like that. I also like this idea that Agatha knew it was a lie and it was just this con. And after her son's death, like some witch comes looking for the witch's road. And this idea that the legend of it spreads and it keeps luring in more witches. And, we get this sort of montage of going through different time periods of her in a circle with witches in the woods and taking their power and having the time of her life doing so. But to go back to like them not fleshing out the Agatha and Rio story, the other big thing that kind of irked me about this is that, especially after episode 8, because the start of episode 8, there's an extended conversation between the two characters where Agatha basically makes a deal with Rio to offer up Billy on a platter, because Death really wants Billy, because Billy's not supposed to be alive. He was a spirit, or arguably a fake spirit, who stole life from someone else's body and shouldn't be alive, and therefore is kind of an outlaw from Death, right? Billy's a wanted fugitive from Death. And Agatha ultimately agrees to do this and makes a big deal, but part of the deal is that Agatha never wants to see Rio again until it's finally her time to die. She doesn't want to feel that she's being stalked and hounded by Rio, something that the Darkhold's been had kept her away from in years recent. But I felt like they never, really get into why Rio's really gunning for Agatha, other than the fact that Agatha just keeps extending her life and therefore is never been on the table. This idea that Agatha herself is an outlaw from Death because she keeps extending her life by stealing life force from other witches. Okay, I understand that part, but I don't know if they ever made it clear to me that Death really had a problem with that, especially since Death in earlier episodes, it was implied, quite liked the fact that Agatha kept killing other people because it gave Death more people to take. But I don't know. I feel like everyone's going to die anyway. Does it really matter to Death if a few women every however many years get killed a bit early? Does it matter that much in the grand scheme of how many people Death is taken in on a day-to-day basis? I don't know. It made like Death's world feel quite small in a way, in that sense. I suppose the other thing about Death that we should probably mention is, now I'm not a big Marvel comic reader. I've not read a lot of the classic stuff or anything like that. But I do remember when Thanos was becoming a big thing in the movies and people were talking about him, the big thing that everyone kept hearing about Thanos when he was introduced is that he wanted to, take over, destroy everything or half of everything because he was trying to court Death. He was trying to, like, impress Death because he wanted Death, like, romantically, I believe. And that was kind of his motivation for everything he did in the Infinity Gauntlet stuff in the comics. And that was obviously not in the movies at all. It was this whole, kill half of everyone for balance and it'll make the universe a better place or whatever. And I saw that some fans, when they introduced Death, were hoping there'd be some kind of at least hint or breadcrumb that there was a history between Death and Thanos at some point. And apparently that's never even, like, they never even considered doing it. It was nothing they ever were told to do or wanted to do, even maybe. And yeah, I think that's maybe irked some fans of the comics because they were hoping that there would be more of a tie to that stuff, and that even though, I mean, they're never going to get that story now because, like, we've done Thanos and he's long gone. And obviously that's not really a critique for me. Like, I don't really care that much, but it's a sort of like deviation. Like, I think most Marvel fans from the comics, when they think of Death as the the entity, the character of Death in the universe, they associate that character with Thanos, maybe first and foremost. Now, I may be wrong in saying that. I'm kind of saying this with secondhand information, but I saw some rumblings, at least from some people, that was like a disappointment element. Not something that I particularly care about. But what I do care about, though, is them setting this stuff up. And what the other thing I'm getting to here about this whole deal that they made about Agatha giving over Billy to save her own skin is that I feel like by the end of episode 8, yeah, I don't even need to include 9 in this, it's just episode 8, because the whole big showdown that happens once they're out of the road and all that is kind of what I'm talking about here, is that Death doesn't really get either of them. Or I guess she maybe kind of gets Agatha, but the fact that Agatha's around as a ghost in the next episode makes me think that Death doesn't have her. But Death, Rio seemed to really care about getting Billy because he was something that wasn't supposed to exist. He is not supposed to be living. He's a crime of life or something. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But it seemed like during the big showdown with Agatha and all that, she just kind of like lets him go. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. That felt really strange to me, and just a straight, like, following the narrative perspective and, like, following what the characters' motivations are supposed to be and what we've been told they are throughout the episode. That felt like something wasn't quite clicking, where I didn't really quite get why it seemed to not matter anymore. But otherwise, though, episode 8 is definitely kind of a weird structure of an episode because it kind of boils down to that one-on-one between Agatha and Rio. And then it's the surviving characters of Agatha, Billy, and Jen in like a super clinical version of Agatha's basement. It almost looks like a sci-fi movie, the set that they're in. And the lights are turning out every so often to kind of imply a countdown of some sort. And it's basically just like solving this final puzzle to get what they want and get out of the road, because at this point they still think it's a real thing. Agatha maybe not quite in the same way, but obviously the other two do. So the big reveals here is that Agatha was behind the magic that bound Jen's power. She was paid by whoever to do it. She didn't know it was Jen. She was just doing that for, I don't know if it was implied it was for money or whatever back in the time period. But for 100 years, Jen's had no magic power because of Agatha. So Jen's able to do an anti-binding spell or whatever on her, and she gets her power back. And we see her in episode 9, like, fly out of the ground and go off into the sky. She's lived. She's off on her way, and she's gone. The other characters are just straight up dead, though. Lily is dead. Alice is dead, the neighbor lady's dead, they're all dead. Which Billy kind of blames himself for once he discovers what created the road, and that it was him basically doing all of it. But Agatha also points out that she was going to like kill them all right there on the day they sang the song. That was the plan until, oh, the road actually exists now all of a sudden. That's very strange. We should probably do something with that. But yeah, so they actually did die. Which, yeah, I think that's the other thing here about the structure of this show, and this kind of feeds into all the Marvel shows that I've seen to some point, is that most of them feel like they would have been better off as a tighter written movie. And I honestly think I feel the same way about this. Because as much as there's probably some nice fun little Easter eggs about what stuff in Billy's room inspired the various trials and the various like costume styles and all that stuff that was going on, and obviously they got to have some fun making these different time period rooms and stuff, it does kind of make those trials feel a little bit like fluff in the middle. And I think my concern back when they introduced the idea of the trials and it was going to be one trial per episode, my instant worry was that was going to feel repetitive, and that it was going to feel like just a series of literally trials, like just a series of simple obstacles. And then the story would get to actually what it wants to do at the end. If anything, in hindsight, I feel even more negative about it, because it really does feel like they had a beginning, which was the first 2 episodes. They had an ending, which is the final 2 episodes, and everything in between there. Not to say there's nothing good in there. Obviously, I praised the structure and how they handled Lilia's story last episode. But for the most part, it does kind of feel like you could have written a tighter version of them going down the witch's road that took much less time than the 5 episodes that we spent in there. It could have been a much tighter, more streamlined thing that hit the narrative points it needed to hit, didn't have time to have that stop-start feeling of like, oh, we have a bit of a debate, we find a trial, we have to solve the trial, we have another sort of heart-to-heart or anger conversation, and then we move on to the next one. And we kind of repeated that structure a little bit, episode to episode. It's... I see a version of this that's 2 hours long and is probably better because of it, because it's not spending all that time. Now, admittedly, the upside to spending the extra time is that maybe you get to spend a bit more time with some of the side characters, but honestly, like, a good writer would be able to achieve caring about those characters in an ensemble story in a 2-hour movie anyway. I don't think that the levels of... Because I think great TV, great written TV that is serialized storytelling, absolutely does things that a movie, or even like a trilogy of movies, cannot achieve. It's the beauty of something that runs 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is, and has a great narrative from start to finish, or even a single season of one of those shows. I don't think whatever it achieves here with these characters ever hit remotely the levels of depth of what I expect from good written TV characters to hit. I never felt that connected to them. I never felt the relationships between them get that, I don't know, that deep, effectively. Everything felt kind of shallow to me, by and large, and I don't think my feelings on the end, particularly in that middle 5 episodes of we're on the road, we're doing the trials, and all the side characters that we lost along the way, I don't think we really... I don't think I got much out of those. And especially in hindsight, right? Like I say, the structure of the last one was very good, and I was mostly pretty positive last week. But one thing I forgot to mention last week, actually, was I liked how the ending of the 7 witches chasing them was. Lilia having her big moment and ending those 7 witches that way, I think was a fine way to end their story. But it would have meant a lot more if those 7 witches felt like they actually had any impact before that episode. Other than being a spooky shadow that was following them in one episode, a few before that, they never really got close to them. Never felt like a real threat. Never felt like they caused... they really should have killed one of the members of the team. They should have gotten close ones, and the team's punishment for not keeping their eye on them and for not taking them seriously should have been one of the big deaths of the episode. And it would have made Lily a sacrifice to end them and stop them in their tracks a much, much, much more impactful and bigger deal. But because they never even got close to causing any problems for the team, it doesn't make the sacrifice feel as big to me. And it made the 7 in hindsight feel a little bit whatever. So anyway, that's something I forgot to bring up last episode. I was trying to be nice last episode, and I'm trying to be nice this episode. There's things to say. There's nice things to say, right? But there's a lot of things that I'm not feeling. I'll tell you this though. I did think it was funny that after the big showdown where Agatha sacrifices herself and Billy walks off, I love that he flied into the scene because he's got his powers now, but he walked out of the scene and went into like a typical car to drive home. I get a chuckle out of that. I guess he can't leave his parents' car out there in Westview or whatever it is, but it gave me a laugh all the same. But yeah, so yeah, Jen unbinds herself and that's her. She's gone. She solved it. There's like a moment, yeah, like so Billy, Agatha helps Billy reach out to where his brother might be, and he's like seeing a boy who's been bullied into some water, and then he has this realization, wait, am I seeing like a boy who's dying? In fact, he even questions, am I killing a boy out there to give my brother, who doesn't really exist, a body to go into, right? In the same way that he took this Williams body, that his brother would go into this. I honestly, as a horror movie fan, I couldn't help but think of Jason Voorhees. This felt like Jason Voorhees being killed in the lake. Of course, he never actually died because he's Jason Voorhees. But this is Camp Crystal Lake. This is what I'm watching right now. But once he has this sort of realization, he snaps out of it. And then Agatha ultimately, when time's running short, sort of uses the hair that she's got of her sons and the little locket to grow some life. So life has come from it, and that seems to snap her out of it. So yeah, I mean that whole section in the middle there of them being in the weird sci-fi basement, and they're solving their problems to finally get out of the road, which comes after they realize they've went in a big circle because they walk into their shoes in the road. Yeah, like that stuff's fine. I think the answers and Agatha's way of getting out, it doesn't feel like that well set up. It just kind of feels like, whatever. I also didn't think the when she calls you a coward, hit the deck. I don't think that was kind of a clunky setup in the first place, to be honest. But even when it actually plays out, it just being, oh, she dodges a projectile and that's it. That's all it is. I don't know what I was expecting, but it felt like such a nothing moment in a fight, which ultimately did just become a fight between Agatha and Rio, who's pissed that Billy's not there, and then seems to just let Billy go in 2 minutes when he shows up anyway. Because apparently getting Agatha means she doesn't want Billy anymore, even though I thought the whole problem with Billy was that he's just like an illegal alive person. He's not supposed to be alive, and that's why Death wants him. That's very strange. I whatever. So I don't quite get the follow through in some of those beats there, which is a shame. I will say, I did think the scene in episode 9, because we cut ahead after the kid's born, and Agatha's using Nikki to lure in witches to kill them. Before she has the witches road as a lure, as an urban myth to lure people in, she basically has Billy either talk to witches or steal from them so they'll chase them, and then she'll kill them when they come up to her. But Nikki clearly has a conscience about this. He starts to question why she's killing witches. Could she not just survive with them, kind of thing? And that's why Agatha later on says that Billy reminds her of her son, because he's also got a conscience. He feels guilty about the witches that have died. He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to be that. So yeah, that's all fine. But the scene I quite liked, actually, is the night that Nikki dies. The way it's shown I quite liked, which is that he's lying by the campfire with his mum, and Death, Rio, shows up holding a green flame, like a torch with a green flame, which looked really nice. That's just green bright flame in the darkness, looked really cool, and lures him away. Just sort of takes his hand and they walk off out of the forest, and then they cut to Agatha waking up in the morning. But it's actually just his dead body lying next to her, and she's saying, Nikki, wake up, and she starts to get more terrified. I thought that scene was well directed. I thought it was well written. That scene, there was impact to this moment of her realizing her son was gone. I also kind of appreciate that her son's death doesn't just suddenly make her a good person. She's still evil. She still wants to kill people to keep alive forever. She still wants power. That doesn't change about her, even though she does seem to genuinely care about her son. And those moments do hit well enough. I appreciate them not trying to overly make her nice. I mean, I think there's an implication that because she's going to stick around as a ghost with Billy, that maybe Billy will eventually knock some goodness into her. Maybe this is an influence that if her son had stayed alive, he would have made her a better person throughout the natural course of that relationship, but it was cut short at 6 years, and then maybe Billy now can sort of fill in that void a little bit and maybe push her to being better. But Agatha's Agatha. She's a ghost now. She kind of just confirms what Billy's realised about the road in episode 9 once we come back to the present day. And then he tries to do a spell to banish her and get rid of her. That was the other thing, is that Billy seemed to flip-flop quite a bit about if he wants Agatha around or not, or if he wants to get rid of her and he hates her. Especially since in episode 8, there's a whole thing where he's willing to sacrifice himself to save Agatha, and then Agatha kind of says, yeah, sure, do it. Although I kind of thought she was just lying there to whatever. And Billy also lets Agatha take some of his power. He's like, don't take it all, but go on, zap me, or I'll zap you and you can feed off of it. And she does, and he gets all like weak looking and he looks aged and whatever. But she does stop before she kills him, which maybe is the most growth she has in the whole show, is that she doesn't kill him when she takes his power. Not all of it, but some of it. But then, quite quickly, they do a whole thing where Agatha is like betraying him, but then as she's walking away, he telepathically talks to her and says something about, Nikki, or, is this what you did to Nikki? And then she changes her mind and, gives Rio a big smooch on the face and basically then gives herself up to save Billy. But it felt like they flip-flopped a little bit too much for me. I really don't think I needed to have... I think him willing to give her a power and then her willing to sacrifice herself for him is complicated as that needed to get. I think it being him saying he would and then her just going, yeah, you know what, yeah, that's a good idea, you can sacrifice yourself for me, that's a great idea. Her going along with that and then changing her mind within 30 seconds and sacrificing herself for him, which would have been fine if that was always the plan. If she was just pretending that she was going to let him sacrifice himself, but she was always secretly going to jump in and do the right thing, that would be fine. But it didn't feel like that. It felt more like there was a lot of flip-flopping going there. Because the moment where he says, think of Nikki, or whatever, and she feels conflicted and does the right thing because she's thinking of her son, and that her son would want her to do the right thing, felt like we were meant to take that as a genuine moment of her being convinced, which means she wasn't always planning on doing the right thing. So I don't think that read of it would work. So don't think that quite feels neat either. But yeah. But anyway, yeah. So he wants to banish her in episode 9. Doesn't quite work. Yeah. So, but yeah. But then he's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe you can hang around. We'll be a coven of 2. You can be my ghost and help me with stuffs. And they walk into the light, and it's done. It's over. Agatha points out that all the witches would be dead if she got her way, so the fact that even just Jen's alive means that Billy saved someone, so you should find some peace in that, which is, I guess, mildly comforting. Yeah, so really mixed, ultimately. I think there's some good ideas. I think the twist is a solid one. There's a couple of really well done scenes in here, particularly the leading the boy off to his death in the night, like how that represents her taking his soul. I thought that was done well, looked nice and eerie. All the purple and green lights for the various magics look good. Rio looking kind of cool with the the skull face in the bottom half and all that, which apparently was a practical effect. I just saw that a little bit earlier online. So, I mean, that stuff's cool, but I really think that the most interesting part of the backstory, which was, what was this romantic relationship between Agatha and Rio? How did it start? And how is it so intense that Rio was willing to bend the rules of life and death when it seems like she's still bound to some rules? It's not like she has complete control. I mean, she keeps saying, it has to be done. I have to come and take the soul, because it seems like, like it's the cosmic rules, or there's some higher being that's she's going to have to answer to if she doesn't take all the souls she's supposed to take, or something. Like, if she's willing to bend the rules that much, I really kind of want to see like how intense this relationship is, and because Agatha clearly knows who she is when she shows up during the birth scene, and that's why she's like, no, don't you dare, don't take the baby, like, you can't give me time. So I really could have done with more exploration of that and where that's been. Maybe they're planning on something for down the line. But I don't know. Like I think that thinking with Marvel for me is something that I've just got tired of, and like, oh, the interesting part is still to come. We're going to keep building up to the interesting part. At a certain point, I'm done kind of waiting for the interesting part. The whole thing should be interesting, and the tease the interesting, but not enough for me on that front. So as far as how I feel about the show as a whole, I have a bit of an apathy towards Marvel stuff right now, and this didn't really do anything to change it. I think it's so entrenched at this point that it's going to take a real shock to the system to snap me out of it. It's going to take something truly special and exciting and different that's pulling no punches. And I think the MCU, for anything that I've ever liked in it and has been good, it's never really been something that's taken big swings. I mean, getting it up and running in the first place was the big swing. Ever since they've had a decent amount of success, it's not been a swing for the fences type of property or IP in the broad sense. I appreciate this show doing some different things. I appreciate it being more open with showing gay characters, with talking about those issues and kind of maybe comparing that. And, I think thematically you're comparing some of that to witchcraft and being kind of ostracized by the rest of civilization and seen as the outsiders and as the weirdos, and kind of comparing those things a little bit and sort of like, using that as your identity. I think that scene around the campfire, like back like in the middle of the show, where they were basically making jokes about how the rest of the world see them, about how they expect pointy hats and they expect us to be ugly and all this. This idea of what the world looks at you as and expects of you versus what you actually are is a big theme of the show, and I think that is a very valid thing to explore. But as with a lot of Marvel stuff, especially the movies, admittedly, in the last several years, although I've not seen the last few years, but like the last few years that I did watch of the movies, anytime it did feel like there was something trying to be said in one of the movies. I think Black Widow is a great example of it, where Black Widow, the director, the writer, whoever, they clearly wanted to say something about a specific subject, right? The villain was clearly a stand-in for Harvey Weinstein. It was all about the idea of raising women in a system to be used and abused, and kind of the structure that allows for that, and the men that run that. And when it was trying to say those things, it was by far the most interesting and the most passionate that movie ever got. But it's weighed down constantly by having to be a Marvel thing and by having to do all the general Marvel stuff around it. And I think here, some of the more supernatural and witchcrafty stuff, like, I think gets a little bit in the way, or doesn't quite meld enough with everything else as much as I would like. I do genuinely, I mean, obviously the twist works because it is tied to what Wanda did in Wandavision, so I can't really say that I think it would be better if it was completely standalone and disconnected. But at the same time, I do kind of wish that there wasn't so much talk of a previous thing, if it was just completely standing on its own merits. But it's just kind of the fatigue of the Marvel shared universe kind of still being there. I need something spicier. I need something to hit a bit harder. And this, it has good qualities, as a lot of Marvel things do, even still, but not enough to kind of like move the needle into I was excited about this to watch it on a week to week basis. I still had kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of a passive attitude whilst watching it, as opposed to feeling truly invested and caring about where it's going, which is tough. It's tough to sit down and talk about something when you feel kind of just numb to it for the most part. I in some ways I'd almost rather hate it. Like, I would rather feel passionate about it in a hateful way, because at least then I'd have something to rave about. I'd be like, oh, I'm angry because of this. I'm angry because it's deliberately wasting my time with that, or it's this thing's so stupid, it's painful, or whatever. I'd love to feel that passion more than this in the middle kind of apathy, because this in the middle apathy is tough to to know what to, because if I hate something or I love something, it's easy to come in and say why I love it or why I hate it. But when you feel so in the middle in a really kind of unpleasant way, it's hard to feel excitement and have that passion to kind of really drive like the main talking points. So it's tougher. So hopefully I haven't made a complete mess of it trying to talk about this show. I hope that at least there's been some perspective of someone who is feeling jaded with Marvel and what this is or isn't doing that's working for me. Yeah. I think bizarrely, as much as I said like the middle of the show, all the trials of the stuff that feels kind of it's kind of this double-edged thing where it both feels like it was so short and so repetitive that it felt like it was a waste of time, or it felt like it was fluff and just taking up too much time. But in a weird way, I think one of the ways you could have fixed it is by making all those episodes longer and making all of those trials feel like full, complete stories that took a full runtime of an episode and really kind of like said something with each one. But that's not what I felt as I was going through them. Some of them felt very short. Some of them felt like we don't have, obviously we focus on certain characters. Like we have an episode focusing on Alice about ending her curse and with her mum and all the rest of it. But there's definitely, maybe it's just a taste thing. Maybe they're just not written in a way that I find particularly appealing in the way that it builds up to the revelations and the character journeys. But I think for something like that, like I would have said Alice should be the main character of that episode, and the same, they kind of did this with Lilia, actually. Lilia kind of got that treatment where she was the main character of her episode. So at the very end of that episode, it's arguably the strongest one of the season from a rating perspective, just purely because it actually focused on her the entire time. And at the end, regardless of how I felt about the seven witches of Salem going out kind of without ever doing much or any of the other things that I could have complained about, it still felt like a satisfying episode for the most part, because by the end of it, it felt like it was her story from beginning, middle to end, and by the end made kind of a statement about her feeling, a certain way about her life and reaching some kind of content by the time she was dying. Whereas with Alice, I would say, yeah, obviously the plot in her episode was about her and about the curse and the song being this thing that was keeping her safe, and then them dealing with the demon. And the demon looked really cool, actually. Like, I really liked that when we talked about it. But it is just kind of plot. Like, it didn't necessarily feel like we were getting into Alice's mind. It didn't really feel like we were focusing on her reactions. Like, I think maybe like a proper couple of flashbacks with her and her mother, or maybe when she found out her mother had died, or seeing how she fought with her mother or something in a more like expanded way would have really helped like sell kind of the realization that her mother had been protecting her with that song. Like, I think we need like some of that earlier stuff built in, even in the same episode. Just like give us the flashbacks, let us see some of that stuff, make it be about her, so that when she does kind of realize what her mother's done for her and she chooses to fight the curse and fight the demon, it's coming from this place of like, oh, now I realize what my mother was, she gives me strength and I can do that, kind of thing. Like, I feel like there's more they could have done with some of those stories and really beefed them up and made it feel like big character stories, as opposed to feeling like cliff notes in a filler episode, which is ultimately what I think a lot of those middle episodes ended up feeling like, all things considered. Those, little flourishes, those little moments where, Agatha says don't in a really harsh way and it implies some things about the backstory or whatever, and that's good, but I don't think the full episodes were that satisfying as a result. So anyway, I hope I offered something with this. Let me know what you thought of the season in the comments. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. You can support all the content on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and of course you can support via liking, all the usual stuff. YouTube membership's an option as well, although Patreon, I would encourage you to go to Patreon instead, just purely because it also gives you all the bonuses from the Mail Fuzz Movies channel, where all the movie podcasts live, and those are all shows that I do with other people. So if that sounds like fun, go check out Mail Fuzz Movies. But that is me. Thank you very much for joining. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?